we are going to take a look at how to set up your information on your SCADADroid's website. In addition, we will look at how to set up and test alarms, as well as set up your phone book.
When you get the SCADADroid from Rionix, the first thing you're going to do is connect up. The default IP address is 192.168.1.15 and hit enter. It will come up with our screen. So if it's like here, it's a little bit bigger than the screen. So if you can do control and minus, it'll shrink the screen just a little bit. As a point of reference, down here it tells you the firmware version. So this is firmware version 2.2 and release 008T, and it's a version 4 hardware. So all of our products over the last 5-10 years, this is where you find that information. So this one's currently up to date. The default password is admin. The default password is password, and hit enter. And this is the way it looks when it first comes up. So as a very, very simple dialer, if you're not using email, I would encourage you to go to edit here and go to never, save it, because then it won't keep trying to get email and block up your network and user data. Depending on your carrier, you need to change this APN. So right now you can tell it's not connected to the network because it has no IP address, no subnet, and no DNS. So the reason that internet is not the right APN, so this depends on the carrier. So we're using a Rogers SIM, so M2M internet.apn is the correct one for Rogers. Verizon is VZW Internet. AT&T is typically broadband, although it can be internet. You've got to get this information from the carrier. So just give it a minute. IMEI is the number that the phone company may want, especially Verizon and AT&T, and they tie the SIM, which is this identifier down here, to that IMEI. So they correlate together. So now you can see we just registered on the Rogers network, and we're just waiting for our Rogers to give us an IP address, and then we are ready to go. So we now have an IP address, and we've got the subnet, and it says connected. That's the most important thing. So this means we're connected to the Rogers network at this point. And the system you're on, sometimes they provide you with a phone number, sometimes they don't. So the easiest way to find out what your phone number is go to Tools, System, and then Tools. And come in here and type your phone number, like your cell phone, and then send yourself a text. So we say test, text, or something like that, just so you kind of know it's you. Just give it a minute. It'll show up on your phone as a text and you'll receive it. And now you'll know the number. If we go back to System and Settings and go right to the bottom here, there's a place to set your own phone number. The phone number of this unit is 782-534-4322. So we're going to set that. Also, while I'm here, I want to go ahead and set the time zone as being Mountain Time. So now when we come back here to the overview page, now we have the phone number in there and future people can use it. Now we also come over here and we can see that it's now put the correct time and date for the clock. It actually synchronizes to the clock whenever you need it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to come into here and we're going to set up a phone book. So I would encourage you to, it comes up with, and you'll see this everywhere in the SCADADroid, it gives it a default name that pretty much doesn't make sense. So you want to put this here like operations or a person's name or something like that. SCADADroid will support multiple groups and multiple shifts. So a shift can be either a daily shift, like from 8 to 5. It can also be 8 to 5 during the work week. And then you can have another person so for 1 week, maybe you're on day shift and the other week you're on standby 24 hours. You can alternate back and forth if you have multiple people. So that's what this is. You type in your phone number here. And if you're going to want to be contacted by email, you obviously need to put your email address in there. So right now, we're just going to do text for simplicity. But typically, if you're doing voice, you will do text and you will do voice. For every alarm that we get, we're going to get a text and we're going to get a phone call. Now remember that when a voice call goes out, it takes several minutes to get to the next one, because by the time it processes this, if it goes through some sort of exchange at an office, it takes time. So you got to leave this so it doesn't go too fast. In the alarm section when we do this, we probably want to repeat it every 5 minutes rather than every minute, because if it does it every minute, it's never going to catch up. If somebody goes on vacation, you can make this go to no, take them off the list temporarily. And then we have several different languages that we support. So typically we have by default male English, but you can get Spanish, French, Italian, German. Some people have a hard time understanding the voice. So on an individual basis, you can go to 80% of the speed. So you can slow it down a little bit if you're having trouble understanding it. If you get bored with it, you can speed it up. And then this is the acknowledge code that comes back when you acknowledge the alarm. So I would encourage you to have a unique acknowledge code for each individual. Just that way, it's easier for the SCADADroid to correlate that code came from, whoever is responding on the phone number. So the next thing we're going to do is click on the Alarms tab. And we have several different types of alarms. If you're just using the front digital inputs, so like a high-level switch or an intrusion alarm or something like that, we have these 8 digital inputs, and we're just going to do that for this demonstration. So we're going to put on here that we're going to use digital input 1. We're going to put in here that it has to be on, by default for 5 seconds. And then you can make it so that we change that target. So right now we're just going to say it's fixed. So whenever it turns on, we've got an alarm. Or it could be whenever it turns off, it has an alarm. We can select that we're going to send out a text when it goes into alarm. We can send out a text when it's clear. Or we can send out a text when it both goes to alarm and when the alarm goes away. So typically it's just alarm. This is the default group that we were talking about. When we have more than one group on this alarm for escalation, we're going to delay 5 minutes until we call the next group. So again, if you're doing voice and you have 5 people on the first group, this number has to be quite a bit bigger than 5. It probably has to be 10 or 15 minutes, because it's going to take 5 minutes to call the first group before it calls the next group. For the repeat action, we can send it once. We can send it until it's acknowledged, or we can keep sending it and bug the person until it gets taken care of. Enabled is handy just if for some reason temporarily you want to disable the alarm, you can hit no and then put it back to yes rather than deleting it and putting it back in again. When we have this alarm, most of the SCADADroids, a good portion of them go out to monitor things like wet wells, lift stations, sometimes, facilities where there's an alarm like a small water plant or something. What you type in here is what will be received on the text. I just typed in high wet well level. So we're done. If you have one alarm, that's it. If you have 2 or 3, you just repeat this process. Real quickly, I want to go down here. The other types of alarms, we can have Modbus alarms. So these come from a control system that you pull. And then we can also make tags, which are usually an extension of a Modbus alarm. So you can scale an analog input, for instance. In another video, we're going to show you how to do this with the analog input on the SCADADroid and how to set that up so it'll call out. So if your water tower gets empty, it'll call out. If your wet well hits a high level, gets too full, it'll call out, that kind of thing. We also show you that it's lost communication with the control system and it can call out. And so again, it can call out to the different call out groups. So you could have it call a maintenance guy or a programmer rather than dealing with an operator. So that's it. Okay, so now to test this, if you go to the status page, you can simulate any of the digital inputs on the SCADADroid. On this connector that has power on it, there's also 8 wires, so 8 switches. As soon as one of these contacts closes, one of the lights down here will turn on, and that will show up here on the display as being on. So we can simulate that by saying toggle it on. And then when you come down here back to the alarms and we scroll down, we'll see that we've got an alarm down here. So this is under the Alarms tab. Under History, there's an alarm. And momentarily, I should be getting a text and a phone call. So I just got the text, and it says high wet well level, and it says alarm notification number 283 from SCADADroid, high wet well level, status. It goes on like that. For me to acknowledge it on my phone, I do the number sign 283 space and then my acknowledge code from my phone book, which the default's 1234. And I send that and I will get an acknowledge here on the alarm. So you can see here I received the code on the phone call 1234, and if you go back to here, the alarm got acknowledged by operations on that phone call. So this acknowledge alarm disappeared. The acknowledge went away. You can see that the alarm got acknowledged. So that's very simply how you set up a simple alarm dialer. Before you go, make sure that you come in here and disable the simulation. So we go back to real life conditions. And from then on, it will put it into service and it will call you out and give you an alarm based on that condition. One really last thing is that down here, it shows you the state of those digital inputs. So you can see we turned it on and then we turned it off. It's all time stamped as to what time it was. The other thing I want to show you is if you go over to notifications, systems and notifications, show you the incoming emails, the outgoing emails. There was my incoming message to acknowledge the alarm. There was the calls out to acknowledge it. This is the incoming voice and the outgoing voice. So basically, if you go back to this notification, you can have a history of exactly what happened, what transpired, what happened to that alarm, who acknowledged it, how long between when we sent it out and they got it back.